Hi, and welcome to Anne's Family Recipe. Today we're making the perfect recipe for Cinco de Mayo, or any day of the year, my pulled pork tacos. This is one of my husband's absolute favorite meals that I make, and there's lots of different flavors and textures going on, so let's get started. The first thing I'm gonna make is a pineapple and avocado relish. I don't know whether to call it a salsa or a guacamole. It's kind of a mix-up of the two. So I have a beautiful fresh pineapple here, and you can see it has sort of a nice golden color. And if you smell it, it smells like nice sweet pineapple. That's a good way to know that it's ripe. And I'm gonna show you how I chop this up real quick. I'll probably only use maybe like a third of the fruit, but I'm gonna chop it all up today so I can save it for my kids to snack on throughout the week. So the first thing I do is just cut off the top and the bottom of the fruit. And that makes it a lot more stable to work with because I can stand it upright. Plus this isn't in the way. Although you can always save this as a garnish for something, it's pretty cool. So next I'm gonna slice down all of the sides. I'm gonna go all the way around, and then we'll section this up and take out the core. All right, so I'm just gonna get rid of a couple of these little eyes here that are left. It smells so sweet and tropical. I love it. And it is so much more cost effective to just buy a fresh pineapple yourself and cut it up. It takes a little bit of extra work, but it saves you like $3 or $4, so it's worth it to me. So next, I'm just going to cut the whole fruit in half, and then in half again. And that's gonna kind of expose the core here. And I'm just gonna cut the core out, just like that, because that is pretty tough and fibrous, so you don't really wanna eat that part, but then we've got all the nice flesh here that we can chop up in whatever size you want. I'm gonna dice mine pretty fine because it's gonna make a little bit of a sauce for our tacos. So now we'll just core the rest of our quarters. So I'm actually gonna use about half of the pineapple here, and I'm just gonna dice it into small pieces. And I just wanted to give you a quick tip too. What I decided to do was chop my pineapple before any of the other veggies that I'm using, because I'm gonna use the same cutting board. And since I'm not using all of the fruit, it won't take on any like onion flavor or cilantro flavor or any of the other ingredients that I'm gonna chop up. So do the fruit, any sweet ingredient you have, do that first. Next, I'm gonna chop up about half a bunch of fresh cilantro. So what I like to do is kind of roll it all up as tightly as I can and then chop through it. And you can use the stems too, they have great flavor. Smells so fresh, love it. But I know not everybody loves the flavor of cilantro, so you can definitely cut back or omit it if you want to, no big deal. Okay, so we'll add this in with our pineapple. And next up, I have just about a quarter of a white onion. That's just what I have on hand. You could use red onion, you could even use some scallions, green onions too. And I'm just gonna chop this up finely as well. Next, I'm gonna cube up a couple of beautiful avocados. Oh yeah, this one's perfectly ripe. Let's see. If I can open it up, there we go. Lastly, I'm just gonna squeeze the juice of a fresh lime, and this is gonna give it awesome flavor, and also hopefully it'll help preserve the bright green color of the avocado so that they don't turn brown right away. Oh, I love the smell of fresh limes. Okay, and then I'm just gonna add a little sprinkling of coarse salt and then stir it all together, cover it, and let it sit in the fridge for a little bit so that all the flavors marry together. And if you don't like pineapple, this would be really good with some fresh mango too. Just kind of that sweet taste with the creamy avocado. And then I'm gonna make a homemade barbecue sauce, which is nice and tangy and savory, and then some sharp cheddar cheese. It all goes so, so well together. And doesn't that look beautiful? So there's our first topping done. Next, I'm going to show you how I make my homemade barbecue sauce. Now, I love making this from scratch. Of course, you could buy your favorite bottled barbecue sauce at the store. It just has a nice sweet and tangy contrast to all the other ingredients going on in our pulled pork tacos. This is a totally customizable portion of our recipe today. Basically, I start with a base of ketchup and a little bit of water to thin it out, and then you can add in all kinds of ingredients. So I always like to have something tangy, something sweet, something a little bit spicy. I also add a couple of like dried seasonings too, just to boost up the flavor a little bit. So here we go. I'm gonna start with probably about a cup of just good old ketchup. Can you tell I have a big family? I buy the vat of ketchup. I can't deny it though, I love it too. And of course it's Heinz because we're in Pittsburgh. To thin the ketchup out, I just added about a half a cup of water. You want to start with just a little bit and then you can add more if you want to thin out the consistency, but don't go overboard or else it'll get really watery. Next, I'm going to add some Dijon mustard. Now, this is going to be kind of my spicy element. You could also add in some crushed red pepper flakes, you could add in some hot sauce, whatever sounds good to you. So this kind of kills two birds with one stone. You've got the mustardy element and that little bit of spiciness too. So I'm gonna add about a tablespoon of that to start. You can always adjust this as you go along. You wanna taste it after all the flavors simmer together for a few minutes and see where you might need to add a little bit more of something. Okay, next we'll do our tangy element. So I just have some apple cider vinegar here. You could use any kind, like white vinegar. You could even go a slightly more Asian direction and use rice wine vinegar. I love that. Has a slightly milder, sweeter flavor. Okay, so I'm gonna use about a tablespoon of the apple cider vinegar. And then I have brown sugar. This is my go-to sweetener for barbecue sauce. You could also use molasses. You could use, I've used jelly before too, like a peach or an apricot preserve would be really good. Any combination of those would be delicious. So this is kind of the end of a bag here, but it's perfect. It's about like a quarter to a third of a cup. So we'll dump that in. There we go. And then we're just gonna season this up a little bit. So I have some salt and pepper and then onion powder and garlic powder. Okay, and then I'm just gonna stir it all together, let it simmer for a couple minutes and give it a taste to see where we are. Next, I'm just shredding up a brick of sharp white cheddar cheese. And if you would like a milder cheese, Monterey Jack would work really well here too because it melts really nicely. My pork butt has been cooking low and slow for about 7 hours now. I started early this morning by spraying the inside of my crock pot just with a little bit of baking spray so nothing would stick. I put my 8-pound pork shoulder into the crock pot. This was such a steal. I got this at my local grocery store today. It was about 12 bucks. It is such a great price. So if you ever find a pork butt on sale, buy it and freeze it and use it if you don't want it right away because that is a really, really great price. I put the pork butt into the crock pot that I had sprayed and then I added about 3 or 4 cups of Dr. Pepper on top. You'll see maybe the label, it says Dr. Thunder. I just picked it up from Walmart. But the cool thing about this cooking method is you can use any kind of dark soda. So I've used Coke, I've used root beer, I've used Dr. Pepper, and they all taste great. The sugars in the soda are gonna kind of help break the meat down and give it a little bit of extra flavor, but nothing overpowering because we're gonna add all these other condiments on top. So I set the temperature on my crock pot to low for 7 hours, and now we get to unveil the incredible meat inside. I just used 2 forks to pull the meat out of the crock pot, and luckily it didn't totally fall apart because I can already see that it's gonna shred really nicely. Now I have it on a cutting board that has a little lip, so it's gonna catch some of the juices that drip. And then I'm just gonna take all this fat layer off the top and separate the meat from the bone because this was a bone-in pork shoulder. And I don't know if I explained this earlier, but this kind of meat goes by either pork shoulder or pork butt. It's not actually from the butt of the pig, it's from the shoulder. But that's why it works really well for a low and slow cooking process because all those muscles break down and it gets super tender. So I'm using my 2 forks, I'm gonna shred up all the meat. It's a little bit of a labor of love, but it's totally worth it in the end. My homemade barbecue sauce is simmering away over here on low heat. Smells great. I gave it a taste and the flavoring was to my liking, but of course I really do suggest that you taste it and you can always adjust any of the seasonings to your taste. So The last step is to heat up our corn tortillas. Now this has the most authentic flavor, I would say, to like a traditional Mexican taco, but you can use flour tortillas, you could use hard corn tortillas like taco shells, whatever works for you is totally fine. But the really cool trick that we like to do is to heat these up over our gas stove. So I'm gonna turn my 2 burners over here on, probably to about medium heat. Maybe medium low. These got pretty hot. You don't wanna burn these. Well, actually, we kind of do. We want to give them a little bit of a char because that gives it great flavor, but we just don't want to overdo it. So it's going to warm it up and make it a little more pliable, easier to work with, and then give it a little extra flavor too. The final step is to assemble our pulled pork tacos. So I'm starting with my slightly charred corn tortilla, and this took about 30 to 40 seconds on the first side, and then when I flip them, only about like 10 to 15 seconds on the second side. You want a nice char, but you don't want to burn either side. Well, you don't want to light them on fire. That's happened to me before. We don't want that to happen. Okay, so next we're gonna add a little bit of our shredded cheese. I like to add that in first, because it kind of acts as a glue for the other ingredients, and the warmth of the other ingredients will help melt it a little bit too. Okay, so a little bit of shredded cheddar, and then I'll add my pulled pork next. This is super tender. I wanna give it a taste. Oh yeah, it's just falling apart. It is so, so good. I don't know why I'm being so skimpy here, hold on. Lots of pulled pork. And then we have our avocado and pineapple salsa slash guacamole here. Add a little bit of that. I love that color too. Okay, and then to top it all off, I'm gonna drizzle on some of the homemade barbecue sauce. This is nice and hot too, so that'll help melt the cheese. Just kind of bring it all together. Okay, you know what's next. I get to give it a taste. Yes, you absolutely need to make these. Oh my gosh, okay. So many different flavors, so many different textures, and they all marry perfectly together. Wow. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel and follow me on Instagram at Anne's Family Recipe. Thank you so much for joining me in my kitchen. Happy Cinco de Mayo, and I'll see you again soon for another family recipe. For the full recipe, check the description box below, and don't forget to subscribe to my channel. Thanks for joining me in my kitchen.